Death used to mean something in comics. It was a shocking event, one that would fundamentally change the surviving characters and would permanently remove the deceased character from the playing field. But over the years, as one generation of fans becomes the next generation of comic creators, things start to change. It wasn't long before dead characters started to pop up, sometimes with poorly thought out resurrections. But over the years, as fans became savvy to these tricks, just the simple act of killing a character was no longer enough. No, now it was necessary for the deaths to become something increasingly more shocking. After all, everyone knows the resurrection is inevitable, so now it's just an arms race to kill off characters in utterly mental ways. With this in mind, I'm Jules, your Southwest Savage for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 most insane deaths in comics history. Number 10. Hawkeye can't take off his quiver. In Avengers 502, old Bird Ear is having a wee scuffle with some Kree soldiers. Then a stray blast hits Hawkeye's quiver and lights a fuse on one of his explosive trick arrows. Hawkeye then grabs a Kree with a jetpack and flies them both into one of the Kree ships, blowing himself up along with the soldier and the ship. So Hawkeye is wearing a quiver, which can be removed from his body. He has enough time to grab a soldier, activate the soldier's jetpack and fly into a ship that has to be quite some distance given the battle is occurring in the heart of New York City. Why not just take off the quiver? Or why not just pull the arrow out and shoot it at something? Say the ship you clearly want dead. I guess you could say he was a bit of a bird brain. Oh God, that pun hurt coming out. Number 9. Spidey's cancer-causing sperm. In Spider-Man Reign number 3, Spidey has been gone for 30 years and Peter Parker is living life as a florist in New York City. Encouraged by J. Jonah Jameson to put on the webs again, Peter is nonetheless tortured by visions of Mary Jane. But it's only in the 3rd issue that we find out what actually happened. We all remember the radioactive spider that gave Peter his powers. Well, it turns out that that spider not only irradiated Peter's blood, but his other bodily fluids as well. You can see where I'm going with this. This means that the very act of loving Peter infected MJ and she contracted cancer as a result of this exposure. Number 8. The Blob eats the Wasp. In Ultimatum number 2, Magneto, enraged by the death of his children Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, attempts to destroy the planet, as you do. The series was notable for its many deaths, but this one is less like taking the cake and more like the entire buffet. For when searching for the Wasp, Hawkeye and Yellowjacket discover the Blob eating her corpse and commenting that it tastes like chicken. It's honestly hard to fathom what was going on in the minds of the writers, as this was a decent hero being eaten by an at best C-grade villain, all for the sake of a cannibal joke. Number 7. Green Lantern Roadkill. In Green Lantern Mosaic number 2, we are witness to a supremely comical and quite odd death. The Lanterns, as we well know, are comprised of multiple alien species, and one of them is a creature that looks like a squirrel or chipmunk called Chip. As this was the 90s and comics were starting to get darker, this cute furball really began to stick out. So the writers gave him a dignified and honourable death. He was run over by a big yellow truck. That's right, one of the galaxy's chosen warriors with potentially lots of power with his people was smashed, all because Batman and the Watchmen had dictated that comics weren't for kids anymore. Number 6. The Avengers and the Fantastic Four run into Onslaught. In Onslaught Marvel Universe number 1, readers were introduced to Onslaught, who was created when Professor X mind-wiped Magneto and somehow absorbed some of his essence. Onslaught plotted to destroy both humans and mutants. With a Sentinel army occupying New York, Onslaught created a citadel in Central Park, and the combined forces of the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men converged on him for a final battle. After the Hulk sacrificed himself to destroy Onslaught's armor, somehow he survived and became a being of pure psionic energy. The only way to stop him was for the non-mutant heroes to run into the energy field, which somehow sucked up that energy and then gave the rest of the X-Men something to hit. So they effectively killed all of their friends just so that they could kill Onslaught, who was inhabiting them. Number 5. Dr. Light becomes a human candle. Dr. Light was initially introduced as a villain who nearly took down the entire Justice League, using his light-based powers in creative ways to exploit their various weaknesses. Following that grand beginning, however, Dr. Light was quickly reduced to a joke villain, becoming little more than an annoyance for the Teen Titans. However, that all changed when it was revealed that Dr. Light used to be a serial rapist. Now, for some reason, he'd suddenly remembered that he loved a bit of sexual abuse and he set about gathering what he needed, which turned out to be a superhero rape orgy where prostitutes were dressed as the Teen Titans, because fuck taste and decency, right? The Spectre then appeared and transforms Dr. Light into a human candle, with his head being the wick, and then he just set him on fire. Number 4. Jenny Sparks electrocutes God's brain. See, this big being who created the universe and life on Earth came down and just says that it's going to wipe the slate clean. Jenny isn't keen on this, so goes inside this thing's body fighting antiviruses and then heads up to its brain. She then proceeds to use every ounce of her power to fry God's brain and herself in the process. Number 3. Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man's freaky Friday. Over the course of many months, Spider-Man was forced to access the hive mind that controls the Octobots, which are Doc Ock's pseudo-henchmen, but this also gave the good Doctor access to his mind. This allowed him to program an Octobot to perform a mind swap between them, with Dr. Octopus taking over Spider-Man's body and Peter Parker's mind being left trapped in the deteriorating body of one of his arch-enemies. With only 700 minutes left to live, Peter tries desperately to reverse the process by confronting the new Spider-Man directly. Once this attempt failed, Peter tried to kill them both, but this too was thwarted by Doc Ock. However, in his final moments, Peter realised that the mind link was still established between them and he could imbue Dr. Octopus with all of his memories and the values that drove him to become Spider-Man. Peter died within the body of his greatest nemesis, but as a result of his final act, Dr. Octopus came to the same realisation as Peter did about power and responsibility. From that day forth, he made a vow to become a better Spider-Man than Peter ever was, a superior Spider-Man. Number 2. The Flash runs to death. For years, DC's continuity was sort of all over the place, and in order to make sense of it, they introduced the concept of multiple Earths to explain the differences. To streamline this, DC Comics engineered an event called Crisis on Infinite Earths. The intention was for the DC continuity to be simplified with only one universe as opposed to several. The story consisted of a powerful villain called the Anti-Monitor who was out to destroy as many Earths as possible. One of the Anti-Monitor's plans was to use a cannon powered by antimatter to penetrate Limbo and destroy the remaining Earths. The Flash then managed to break free after being held captive by the Psycho Pirate, one of Anti-Monitor's terribly named flunkies. The Flash ran around the cannon's antimatter source, forcing the antimatter energies back into the machine, and was running at such extreme speeds that he began running back in time. The side effect of this was that the Flash aged so rapidly that he pretty much disintegrated within his costume. Barry Allen's death was a significant event in the DC Comics, and it remains one of the most powerful and most inventive deaths in comic history. And number 1, Superman throws a pregnant Lois into space. Injustice Gods Among Us is a pretty sweet fighting game developed by the makers of Mortal Kombat, but it's also got a backstory with some ridiculous aspects thrown in. For those of you who haven't played it, the game focuses on an alternative universe where after the death of a pregnant Lois Lane and the destruction of Metropolis, Superman goes a bit crazy and decides to take over the world so he can bring order to it. In the first episode of the print edition, Lois is captured and tortured by the Joker and Harley Quinn. Superman is then infected by the Joker with a mixture of fear toxin laced with kryptonite, and this leads Supes to believe that he sees Doomsday, so he grabs him, flies above the planet and chucks him into space. But once he does, the toxin wears off and Superman realises that that wasn't Doomsday, but Lois. A pregnant Lois. Oh, and the Joker also tied her heartbeat to a nuclear bomb, and once her heartbeat stops, the bomb goes off in Metropolis. That's so insane, my balls just burst. And that's our list. Got any more comic book deaths you want to share? Well, let us know about them in the comments section below. And why not swing by whatculture.com for more daily articles and news. I've been Jules for whatculture.com. You can follow me here on Twitter @RetroJ with a 0, and I'll speak to you soon.